Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to Sean Mike Podcast. But as you can clearly tell, this is not a podcast. So doing this out of my YouTube channel. I want to do this. Have not done this before, so I am still going to be delivering podcast content, don't get me wrong. But this was my chance to do something a little bit different, get out of my comfort zone a little bit, go on YouTube. So I want to actually share my thoughts coming away, from this Iowa game. Of course, tough loss for the Huskers, not able to pull it out, but thought there was still some promising things and things we can take away from the game. So just rewinding a little bit, when we look back on the last few weeks of the Husker season, coming off a Penn State game, that was considered, a good win. Of course, Penn State, had not won a game, so that's always tough. But at the end of the day, it still was a good win for the Huskers. So always positive to see them get their first win of the year, be able to hopefully build some momentum, and then being a heavy favorite against Illinois, not being able to pull out that game, not being able to really win a game they were supposed to win and win a game that they were expected to win. And I think that's always a tough thing when you're a heavy favorite. People think your season's going to turn around and trend the right direction. But at the end of the day, I think what's really been what was a tough thing in that game is, not really knowing who the QB was going to be. I mean, going between, with McCaffrey, starting that game, Martinez really only getting some cleanup action in that game. But overall, the team it wasn't just about one position. It wasn't about the quarterback. The team as a whole just was, not competitive in that game. So that was a tough thing there. But going against this Iowa team, I think that, and just the state of the program right now, people have really been in a tough spot right now. They're just wondering if, you know, what direction the program's heading. I mean, it seems like we've been talking about this the last few years, but, wondering where things are at. But I think it was interesting seeing this team being able to, it was interesting against Iowa. I mean, overall, it was a different game. I mean, the snaps again has still been an issue, and you never want to beat up on a kid, but with the snaps being the way that they were, it threw off so many plays and it threw off some momentum in that game. Definitely wasn't the only thing, but it was definitely a cause for concern from what I saw to the team, with the snapping situation from the center, so many times having to be low, being over his head, off to the right. Once again, you can't blame it just on that, though. I mean, it's still, same thing we've seen, repeatedly. But at halftime, though, I was happy, honestly, just to be in that game. For it to be 13-13, I believe was the score at halftime. So, looking at it from that point of view, you're looking at a team that Iowa was actually, top 25 heading into that game. They're number 24. So you got a top 25 team, and your school is able to be in that game, still have a chance against that game. And what was interesting for me was I remember at the beginning of the game, it was like, okay, Adrian Martinez is starting this game. So I'm like, okay, it's going to be Adrian's game. But that was not the case. Luke McCaffrey was mixed in this game. And so, being able to see him go in there, sometimes I think early on, if I remember the stats right, Martinez had a couple drives where kind of three and out, wasn't able to, get drives going. McCaffrey had a couple drives earlier where the team was able to go down and get a field goal. So, that was really, what the story was early on. But it seemed like down the stretch of that game, well, I want to say down the stretch of that game, they went to Martinez more. But really, when you look at it, even going in the fourth quarter, Luke McCaffrey had some running plays mixed in, had some plays mixed in overall. And then Martinez was, the one that was attempting to finish out the game, the one that was finishing out the game. So it was definitely interesting to see this team, try to make that next step forward. But I've got to say, when looking at the last few years against Iowa, and I think what's going to be interesting for this Huskers team moving forward is I think in a lot of ways Iowa has some qualities that, as much as Nebraska fans might hate to admit, that we kind of admire a little bit, at least in what they've done. I mean, I know I might catch some flack for that because, we never really want to admit that with Iowa. But when looking at that game and looking overall at, when you get to the fourth quarter, the way they were able to grind down the running game, the way they were able to build up some yards, keep, run some time off the clock. Even though Nebraska had a shot to win that game late, when you really look at the amount of time that Iowa was number one, able to, take off the clock, just running the ball, getting first downs. And number two, just, having that, what we call a 4-minute offense to try to finish out the game. Now, having said that, they did not actually finish out the game. I mean, Nebraska had a shot to be able to, win the game and be able to take that next step. But overall, I mean, definitely impressive. It's always impressive to see the way Iowa can, number one, have a solid defense, how they are able to make plays. But then number two, just the way they are able to, finish out games. I mean, if you look at their quarterback, I mean, I was looking back a little bit in the pregame and whatnot. is, their quarterback has been up and down. So, I mean, they're not winning games because they've got, a five-star quarterback, a guy that's just leading to victory all the time. They're winning games because they're able to run the ball. They've been relying on that more because they've got a defense that's stout, that's able to make plays. I mean, I think heading into that game, if you look at what Iowa's defense gave up overall, I think they're around 350 yards of offense that they give up per game. Which back in the day, you look at that and that wasn't as impressive. But I mean, now with the way that offenses, throw the ball, with where things are at nowadays, that's actually a really impressive figure heading in. So I mean, all hats to Iowa. I mean, at the end of the day, they were able to get the 26-20 win. But I do want to take away, when looking at that game late, it felt like with Martinez, I mean, it felt like the team had some momentum. I mean, later on, it felt like they were driving down the field, had a really good shot to be able to come off with a win and be able to take that next step as a program, have a shot to drive down the field. They were looking great. I believe, don't quote me on the position, I believe the right guard had it to where their guy was able to get past them and they were able to, and of course they were able to, I don't know if they ruled a fumble or a pick. I believe they ruled a fumble because they stripped the quarterback and then they recovered. That's your ball game right there. So, I mean, it's so hard to judge these games because I think as fans, at the end of the day, a win and a loss is really what people are looking for. That's really what determines, that's what they look at in the column. They don't look at if you're close. They don't look at if you got blown out. They're saying, did you win the game? But at the end of the day, too, though, you're going against a top 25 team. Yes, there were mistakes. Yes, there are things that can definitely be cleaned up that they're going to have to clean up. A couple takeaways I would have would be, what's this QB situation going to be like moving forward? I mean, are we still going to have it be where we're rotating? Or are we kind of doing that to see how the season finishes up? Is Martinez going to be the QB? Is McCaffrey going to make that next step? I feel like, of course, it's no secret. I mean, a lot of people can see this, but down the field, consistent passing, hitting those people that are open, being able to make that next step, that's going to be a big thing for this program because the tough thing too when looking at this program is, the next game. A friend of mine, he's a big Notre Dame fan. He's always talking about Notre Dame, and look at where they're at right now. I mean, look at where, not just Notre Dame, look at where other teams are at. I mean, look at where Ohio State's are at. Look at where other programs are at. It's so exciting when your team has that big game feel and when they're truly a competitor for, conference titles, when they're, in the national title picture, when they have a shot at making that, 14 playoff and everything. I think honestly, as a Nebraska fan right now, where I'm at is I'm just looking for a little bit of consistency. Getting to that point to where they, number one, you got to start off by having a winning season. That's going to be that next step. That's going to be a big thing that really puts this team in the next direction. Number two, having it be to where they're consistently getting bowl games. As we all know, Nebraska had a long running streak of bowl games. Even that's been tougher lately. So I think where I come from as a fan and when I'm looking at this is you always want to have it to where your team is nationally relevant. We're in that national title picture. But at the same time, I'm trying to be realistic about the Huskers right now. I mean, I think all that I would look for right now is I'd look for having a winning season, look for, let alone conference title, being able to win, their side of the division to get to the conference title. I mean, that's going to be a big thing moving forward. So I think, honestly, that's where I'm at with expectations with this team. I think that Nebraska consistently can bring in the talent. I mean, if you look at those recruiting classes that Scott Frost is bringing in, the talent's going to be there. And in my opinion, anyway, I think that the talent that Nebraska consistently brings in, has a shot to compete, in the Big Ten week to week. I think a lot of it's just going to be developing that consistency, being able to, dominate both sides of the line of scrimmage. I mean, how many times, once again, looking at how Iowa finished off that game, being able to run a 4-minute offense, being able to protect the QB a little bit better, being able to make those throws down the field, that's going to really be what puts Nebraska, in the next step. Because I get really, really nervous. I hate to say this, but you don't want Nebraska to be that program where, it's like, well, they had a good stretch back in the day, but they're not there anymore. I don't think that's what anyone wants, but that is something that, starts to kind of creep in the back of people's head. Is Nebraska going to become irrelevant? Is Nebraska going to be, the program that recruits still want to go to? But all in all, I think that when looking at the turnover lately, in my opinion, like I said, everyone's entitled to have their own opinion. I think it's going to be getting stability in the coaching staff, being able to, have that consistency with, who's leading the team, who's being able to, point the kids in that right direction. I think once you get stability in a program, then that makes it to where you can have more success. I think everyone probably expected there to be a little bit more with this being year three. But also, of course, everyone plays. I understand everyone has the same conditions. Everyone deals with it. But with the coronavirus and everything, that also has had a big impact on traveling. It's had a big impact on home games, not feeling like home games. For the Big Ten in particular, they weren't going to play their season for the longest time. Nebraska was actually fighting to keep that season alive. But when you look at, and also too, when you're looking at national pictures and other pictures too, I mean, not being able really to have that flexibility to make up a game as easy as other conferences because of the late conference start. So there's a lot of things that go into it. So you never want to make excuses for anything, but at the same time, you do want to recognize that given this pandemic and given this virus, that's also made it for a different situation. Like I said, not making excuses for the team. At the end of the day, everyone has to get used to it. Everyone's in the same boat. Nebraska is not unique in that regard by any means. But I am interested to see what this team can do and what the years are going to look moving forward. But it all starts one game at a time. So this game, you don't get moral victories. They did not win the game. But I think that there were signs that, this team's heading in the right direction. And it makes you feel like if they can put 4 quarters together, where you're not turning over the ball, where you have the snaps consistent, where you have the quarterback play at a certain level, where you're able to dominate on both sides of the line of scrimmage, that's going to really be what puts this team in the next direction. So once again, first YouTube video. Appreciate you guys, having patience with me. Wanted to put my video out there. Kind of, had not done a YouTube video, so wanted to do that. But once again, this will always be referred to as a Sean Mike podcast. That's how it originally started, and I'm going to continue to do podcast content as well. But I do want to say, thank you for anyone that took time to listen to Sean Mike podcast. Hope you guys are having a nice holiday season. Hope you guys have had a nice Thanksgiving. And yeah, stick with me. I'm going to try to put out content more frequently. And, thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to Sean Mike podcast. And you guys have a good night.